Borderlands 3 launched with 190 weapons, which is more than double its predecessor, Borderlands 2, with only 74. After all of the DLC was released, Borderlands 3 was left with 331 guns. Once again, just about double what Borderlands 2 was left with after all was said and done. One of the most exciting parts for me when Borderlands 3 launched was getting to try out the returning guns from Borderlands 2 in Borderlands 3's new engine, which was a novelty that lasted about 3 seconds. Because for whatever reason, returning weapons seem to have a curse, where they're simply not as powerful as they were in their previous game, or even useful at all, with a few exceptions of course. So today, I wanted to take a look at all of the disappointments that Borderlands 3 had from Borderlands 2. Hey everyone, I'm Constant Canadian, and this is the top 9 glowdowns in Borderlands 3. Starting things off, we have the Infinity Pistol. I know, the Infinity Pistol wasn't even really that good in Borderlands 2. But it was at least usable in most stages of the game, and it was actually pretty helpful in log mobbing situations when you ran out of ammo. However, in Borderlands 3, the damage is absolutely atrocious, and the only situations where it could have been useful are completely negated by the bullet vamp / cutpurse artifact, which are unlocked a mere 4 missions after you're even able to begin farming for the Infinity Pistol. Zero made especially good use of this pistol in Borderlands 2 due to his one-shot, one-kill skill, which essentially buffed all of the Infinity's damage by up to 120%. But in Borderlands 3, there is just no such skill, so the Infinity is left to be buried by the other 330 weapons in this game. Now, if you're wondering why this video only has 9 entries, it was actually originally 10 entries. In fact, this spot here was actually going to be reserved for the conference call. But after some testing, the conference call absolutely slaps. Maybe it's some weird one-off thing, but this is video footage of the conference call absolutely destroying everything with a very suboptimal build. So yeah, don't sleep on the conference call, I guess. The Babymaker was an absolute destroyer in Borderlands 2, being able to single-handedly wipe Hyperius off the face of the map in the hands of Axton. And it was obtainable pretty early on too, which made it pretty clutch for fighting endgame bosses. The Babymaker in Borderlands 3 also used to be very powerful, especially with Moze, and was able to destroy a lot of the later game content pretty easily. However, shortly after the Arms Race DLC released, Gearbox nerfed every single TDR weapon into the ground due to them overperforming in the aforementioned Arms Race. This left the Babymaker and every other TDR weapon a shell of its former self, with so little damage that it could barely even kill Captain Trant, let alone some of the more tanky bosses. It also doesn't help that for whatever reason, the Babymaker was made into a pistol in Borderlands 3, leaving it with nearly half as much total ammo capacity as before. And did I mention its dedicated drop source is either a one-time reward from collecting all of the Claptrap parts, or from Broodmother on the Pyre of the Stars map, who is a rare spawn, so farming for this thing is an absolute nightmare. And unless it world dropped, it cannot be acquired until the absolute last story mission in the game, so it isn't even helpful early game either. The Gunnerang is essentially the exact same story. Super powerful in Borderlands 2, pretty good in Borderlands 3, but then it got nerfed into oblivion after the release of Arms Race, and it is now pretty freaking useless. Plus, the Gunnerang doesn't even drop from a Batman reference in Borderlands 3, so it's obviously inferior to Borderlands 2's version. The Flakker has always been a pretty niche weapon. In Borderlands 2, the majority of the community that used the Flakker only did so for the damage swapping glitch with the Ahab rocket launcher. But even without that glitch, in the hands of Axton, the Flakker could absolutely wreck face, especially on bigger bosses and larger groups of enemies. The Flakker's long shot delay and crazy spread pattern definitely make it hard to learn, but just like the Lyuda, once you've really mastered the shot pattern of the Flakker, you could absolutely destroy most things with it. In Borderlands 3, however, it is a completely different story. Sure, the Borderlands 3 Flakker still has reduced fire rate and crazy pellet spread, but in Borderlands 3, the Flakker is almost not even worth learning. Not only is its damage crazy low, but there is just a myriad of way better options available in this game. With the Butcher, Hellwalker, Face Puncher, Anarchy, and so many more A or S tier shotguns, the Flakker is kind of just an option for people who want to make the game intentionally harder for themselves. I mean hell, even a non-unique purple rarity Bang Stick or Kielbasa is a better option for early or late game, mobbing or bossing. The Flakker is just simply never the best or even a good choice for any situation in Borderlands 3. The Flakker's explosion distance is also ever so slightly less than the Malawan enemy's keep away distance, which makes this gun ever more difficult to use than it has any business being. The Ogre in Borderlands 2 was one of the most highly sought after weapons for a grenade damage Axton or Krieg build. Despite being one of the most difficult items in the game to obtain, it was a staple in any explosive build's arsenal, and for a good reason. The Ogre is essentially just an explosive shreddifier, which is super good for a character with not only high explosive damage, but big boosts to fire rate and mag size like Axton or Krieg. The problem with the Ogre in Borderlands 3 is its complete lack of damage. With a maximum base DPS of 150,000 with full fire rate, it just doesn't do anywhere near enough damage to hurt things on Mayhem 11 or even past Mayhem 4, despite getting 2 separate buffs to its damage. Couple that with the super slow moving gyro jets and the lack of a character with any big buffs to grenade damage, and the Ogre just looks outright sad, and it's almost like it's not even the same gun. And it's made even worse that it drops from the Anointed Alpha, one of the worst named enemies in this game to farm. Up next we have the Hornet. The Hornet is the very first obtainable legendary in Borderlands 2, and as such is oftentimes one of the first one that a lot of people get, which gives it a pretty special place in our hearts. But with that said, the Hornet is an absolute sleeper of a pistol, with super high damage. The only downfall of this pistol is that it's locked to corrosive. However, a majority of the weapons in Borderlands 2 are armored loaders, so being locked to corrosive doesn't really make a difference, especially considering its damage is also considered grenade damage by the game, so any splash or grenade damage boost increase its damage even further. In Borderlands 3, the Hornet's damage is still counted as splash damage, however it is also still locked to corrosive, and while that may not have been an issue for Borderlands 2's Hornet, it is certainly a problem in Borderlands 3, as there are very few enemies in Borderlands 3 that are actually armored, with most of them being either flesh or shielded on top of the armor as well. The Hornet is also slightly less powerful than its previous form. However, a lot of the issue with this gun is its elemental exclusivity. Corrosive damage as a whole just doesn't have a place in Borderlands 3, which unfortunately leaves the Hornet pretty useless, especially with all of the other absolutely amazing pistols in this game. The Bekah was pretty special in Borderlands 2, as it was one of the only pearlescents in that game that was actually useful. The Bekah's fire pattern is very similar to the Lyuda, shooting one projectile that splits into 3 shortly after firing. The Bekah is pretty much the exact same in Borderlands 3, with the most notable exceptions being its much lower damage, and that it is not a pearlescent weapon since pearlescents were removed from the game entirely. Despite it not being a pearlescent and being far less powerful, the Bekah is far more rare in Borderlands 3, only being obtainable once per character from completing all 10 of Hammerlock's legendary hunt challenges. That's the biggest thing pulling this gun down. The only way to get it at max level Mayhem 10 would be to wait until the end to finish these challenges, and this gun is just simply not worth all that effort. If the Bekah had been stronger, it might have been worth the extra effort. However, most of the allure of the Bekah in Borderlands 2 was that it was a pearlescent weapon, and since that's not the case in Borderlands 3, it's just another legendary C-tier assault rifle that gets outshined by the Monarch and the OPQ system. The Bone Shredder is another weapon that has been in every mainline Borderlands game. Borderlands 3, however, is the first Borderlands game that it has been absolutely useless in. In the original Borderlands, it was an absolutely formidable SMG, being an early game weapon that can do a good amount of damage. In Borderlands 2, it was a powerful SMG, not quite as strong in the original game, but still a strong bullet storm weapon, especially on Gage and Maya. In Borderlands 3, it was a very weak pistol. This has been pretty common in Borderlands 3, where they take a weapon that was one type in previous Borderlands game and then make it an entire separate weapon type in Borderlands 3. Although that really wouldn't have changed anything for this weapon. The Bone Shredder's absolute top damage is 4,524 times 4, or about 18,000 damage. And while that sounds good, for late game, that's really not that strong. And that's not even mentioning the fact that the Bone Shredder in Borderlands 3 takes 3 ammo per shot, which only equals about 400 shots at maximum ammo capacity. This means that you can unload the Bone Shredder's entire ammo capacity into Grave Ward and take down not even 2% of its health. Combine that with the Bone Shredder's absolutely piss poor accuracy, and you get a weapon that is worthless for mobbing and worthless for bossing. The Unkempt Harold is a pistol that needs zero introduction. being Borderlands 2's arguably best weapon. It is known by even the newest of players in the game. The Unkempt Harold is completely broken in Borderlands 2 and can be acquired as early as level 7, and even at weapon level 7 it can be used all the way until the end of the story. It is truly a completely broken weapon. In Borderlands 2. In Borderlands 3, however, it's a bit of a different story. Don't get me wrong, the Unkempt Harold is still great in Borderlands 3, but out of all of the items on this list, this weapon has the biggest difference in power going from Borderlands 2 to Borderlands 3. The Harold in Borderlands 3, while it's still powerful, felt incredibly underwhelming, and a big part of me, and I'm sure a lot of other players, hoped that this Unkempt Harold would break the game like the Harold in Borderlands 2. Of course, that didn't happen, and the Harold became more of a niche use weapon, outclassed by many other pistols in this game. It is such a shame to see so many once amazing guns be turned into mediocre or even trash loot. With that said, it wouldn't really make sense to have the same 5 weapons be brokenly overpowered meta gear every single entry. Are there any guns that should have been on this list that you think I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching and have a fantastic day.